Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the research talk from the Center for Transportation and Logistics. I'm Devjit Roy. I'm one of the co-chair of the center. And today we are really excited to have with us Dr. Abhishek Roy from the Temple School. He's in the Fox School of Business. I know him from several years because of all the work that he does. Let me briefly introduce his background. He's currently a faculty in the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management. He joined the Fox School after his doctoral studies at the UT Austin. His research interests primarily includes supply chain and operations management, but he focuses a lot on multi-sided markets and platforms. And today's talk is on multi-sided markets as well. More specifically, he explores applications of economic models and game theory to study strategic interactions among firms and consumers in supply chain management and platform economics. He earned his PhD and his Master of Science degrees in Supply Chain and Operations Management at the UT Austin, but he's also our alum. He received our MBA from IMA and a Bachelor's in Engineering in Production Engineering from the Jadavpur University. So without much delay, let's give a round of applause to Abhishek. His topic is all about collaborative new product development and co-creating with a shared supplier in the presence of a competitor. What I learned, this is his own brainchild, his own solo work. So we are really excited to hear from you, Abhishek. Or Zoom, both are yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Devjit. Thanks for welcoming here. Always a nice feeling to come back to my alma mater. It's going to be almost 20 years since I stepped into these, not these rooms, but the older rooms over there. So as Devjit said, this is my solo work. So I'm kind of also using this presentation as a workshopping mode to get your feedback on what you think about the idea, what you think about the research contributions, your questions, comments, which will help me in kind of, forging this into the final polished research paper. So yes, the topic is collaborative new product development, co-creating with a shared supplier in the presence of a competitor. Some of those terms would be self-explanatory, some of them not so much. So I'll give you some brief motivation. What is co-creation? It's, in the broadest sense, an economic strategy where people, teams, companies, firms, different parts of the supply chain, they come together, work together to create something that doesn't exist already. It could be a new version of a product. It could be an improved service. It could be a new component. It's a new design, a new research project. And I will time to time bring, for this presentation, the idea of a research project to make sure that, because all of you work on research projects, I'm able to sell the idea that I'm trying to make work over here today. How many of you have worked in research projects of teams of size more than one? More than one people in a research project? 2, 3, 4, 5, all of that. Okay. So before I delve into the idea of co-creation with these slides here, I want you to step back and think about the experience of working with a collaborator. These research projects that you have been working on, I'm going to assume, and it's most likely true, these are new, novel things. These weren't there already. You haven't been told, most of the cases, to work on exactly a fixed thing. It's something that's kind of evolving, right? It doesn't exist. It's not like manufacturing where the design is already done and you are just repeating that. It's not that. Every research project you're working on is something unique, something novel, something groundbreaking, something fascinating. So you are working with your collaborator. And your collaborator is a fantastic collaborator, unlike me. It's a fantastic collaborator, does great work. You and that collaborator decided to do something in the last meeting. And today, when you are going to start working, that collaborator has done something and given to you. It's a fantastic work. Think of how much value, if you put in an hour of work into that project, how much value will be created. Think of that. That's possibility A. Possibility B. After last meeting, That collaborator slacked off. That collaborator did something, but not great. And today, you opened up your computer and you're looking at what that collaborator has done, and you found out it's pretty much there. Now you're looking at what 1 hour of your effort will do to the project. And that's possibility B. Which one is a greater output? Possibility A, where your collaborator did a lot of cool stuff, great stuff, neat stuff, hardworking stuff, and you put in 1 hour of work. Or possibility B, where your collaborator slacked off for whatever reason, did give you a crappy output, whatever, and you are stepping in and doing 1 hour of work. People for possibility A. People for possibility B. B, okay. Before I move on, I want to hear the reasoning behind B.
He contributed some.
Yes.
It's different, and it's more than what that person would have contributed without collaboration.
That's possible. Between A and B, where A, he contributed a lot, and B, he contributed a little, which of these your 1 hour of work would make more sense to, A or B? Still B, because he didn't do much, so your 1 hour of work will make more sense.
If A, he didn't contribute much.
A, he contributed a lot, and B, he didn't contribute much. So now if you put in 1 hour of work in either A or B, obviously A. Okay. That's the underlying idea of collaboration. I'm going to talk about mathematical models, but that's what I want you to kind of take. Where is my camera? Here. Into mind. Which means when you're collaborating, when it's not standard manufacturing or outsourcing or taking an already established idea and then basically repeating that, when it is about creating something in a team, in a group of people, in a group of companies, across boundaries, etc., which we all talk about in strategy, but doing it in practice is difficult. It means what your 1 unit of effort could do is not working in isolation. 1 unit of your effort means different things depending on what your collaborator has done. If your collaborator has done a lot of great things, 1 unit of your effort, assuming that you're not slacking off, obviously, 1 unit of effort might mean a lot, versus if your collaborator has slacked off, your 1 unit of effort might mean little. Debjit.
Depends, based and like in terms of my past experience with the collaborator, because now information is fast.
Yeah.
Are you taking information as
So, valid question. In here, I'm going to say, this is a one-shot project. So I'm not going to use past learning. But in that sense, whether or not I know about this collaborator slacking, suppose you knew about that the collaborator was going to slack off. Then when you're putting in the 1 hour of work effort, you're probably consciously trying to do more. So the 1 hour of your own effort in A versus B is different. So I'm trying to say, let's keep your effort constant. You're not going to overhype. Okay. So yeah, obviously, if your collaborator slacks off, one recourse for you that, yeah, I know that he's going to slack off or she's going to slack off, and therefore I'm going to put more effort. So you're going to do more. I'm saying if you were to do your effort as constant, why would you do better? A versus B. Basic idea. And then you can do obviously different kind of learning, etc. But the fundamental principle being, in a collaborative scenario where my work and others' work are interlinked, what I can achieve in 1 unit of effort is different and is depending on what my collaborators have done. If I work in isolation, which coincidentally this project is, it only depends on what I am doing. Now, right now, it depends on also what you're doing. Okay, because right now you are my kind of crowdsourced collaborators. Okay. So, yes, question. Yeah.
really defining has already been done.
It is.
He said collaborator has contributed towards what? Because we're talking about a radical innovation.
It is.
Very different.
It is. I agree. So quantifying innovation is difficult because you don't really know just by putting an hour of work, you're going to get something great. What I'm going to try here is kind of abstract way and remove some of the stochasticity out of this. And yes, what you're saying is, look, I'm going to put 1 hour of work, but I kind of lucked out. I didn't really get much. Versus there's this sudden idea that came into my mind randomly, and this accidental innovation happened, and this is a great product all of a sudden. That is absolutely a valid point. For the sake of this, I'm going to kind of take the randomness away and kind of make it a little bit hard work based. You are putting at it, you get something out of it. The more people put at it, the more likely they're. So in some stuff, if you want to say likelihood, kind of very abstractly likely. The more effort you put in, the more likely you are to succeed. Putting it that way. Yes, random things can happen. I'll try to keep the randomness out of it for my simple model's sake. Yeah, very valid point. Thank you. Okay, so why did I talk about other questions happening over there in the chat? Yeah. Yes, co-creation generally includes, and I'm going to talk about that, but in this particular case, yeah, when I'm going to talk about supply chain partners, I'm going to talk about co-creation happening by inputs from a customer. That customer need not be the end consumer. Co-creation does happen across with consumers and firms and their suppliers, and firms and their customers. Yes. So going back to that point, recent surveys show that companies are co-creating with different parts of the supply chain. With consumers, the Lego Ideas is a great example. New products are co-designed after taking in inputs from customers. So customers can go and put their inputs into co-designing. They can happen with customers or vendors, not necessarily consumers. Boeing Dreamliner was a great example. When Boeing said we're going to create this new plane, it was not that they said this is the plane and our vendors, you supply us the parts. They got the vendors in. When I was a PhD student, in one of the operations classes, we learned about, at that time, the BMW 7 Series. And back then, there was a different term for it. It was called concurrent design. Some of the old manufacturing pros would remember that term. It's called concurrent design, where BMW wasn't the one going to the component supplier saying, this is the great car we have designed, just make the components at the cheapest price and give it to us. No, they worked with the suppliers and they said, well, we have this idea of what a great car is going to be, but we know you, our suppliers, obviously know a lot of great things about the components you make. And we know what customers want and how those components should be shaped. So why don't both of us kind of come together in design rooms and talk about how your components are going to be better and how our cars are going to fit that component better. And we're going to come up with this entire new design called the BMW 7 Series. So that kind of idea is not absolutely new. It's been taking different shape and is becoming more and more popular. It is no longer the one-off thing that the BMW 7 Series was. It's no longer the one-off thing that Lego is or has been. So it's been quite common. And so the drivers has been that, yeah, it makes sense to get the suppliers involved. Suppliers have a lot of resources. They know how to make the components. They can develop better components if the buyers give them the right ideas. Buyers know what the market looks like, what the market needs, and the suppliers are 1 or 2 steps away from the end consumers. Suppliers can get a lot of new ideas based on what the buyers are finding from the market. And so in recent years, this kind of joint development of components, joint developments of core, parts have become more and more common. I'm not an empiricist. I'm not going to talk about empirical research over here, but if you are interested, you can go and look at a lot of empirical research that have been happening on supplier development. how companies go and invest with their suppliers, where the suppliers can make better products. I'm going to use the word better very, very loosely. It's a higher quality product that fits the market need better. The examples being GM and LG Chem has a joint venture to create better batteries for EV. LG Chem and Honda has created a joint venture to create better EVs. LG Chem and Stellantis has a joint venture to make better batteries for EVs. What's the common trend or thread in these first three examples? Battery, yes, and JV, yes, and LG. All three very different car manufacturers share this very common supplier called LG Chem. They are a big name in battery manufacturing, and with them, these car manufacturers are setting up JVs. Question? So, yes.
Between the downstream or the upstream collaboration between the producer and the supplier, and what is called vertical integration.
Vertical integration basically is the two companies essentially becoming one, and since they become the common ownership. So the two companies have aligned goals. And says, so in this case, LG still is a standalone company where GM is cannot tell LG who to partner with, who not to partner with. So this joint venture here is more about GM telling LG what they think will be good in terms of how car batteries should be now shaped to fit better into cars. This also used to happen when I worked as a consultant post-time Ahmedabad. We were the common consultant for multiple different rival companies in the same industry. Now, there are some similarities in how this supply development happens, because here, engineers, developers from two different companies, they come together and they basically work together to make better components. For those of you who are a little bit familiar with consulting, that happens there too. We just don't go and tell companies, this is the solution for your problem. We first identify the problem, work together with the partners and other client managers from that company, identify what the problem is together, and then try to find a solution together. We bring in our expertise, we try to understand what's happening with the company from their perspective. They may know more about some things, we may know more about something else. We come together, we complement each other and find a solution. Once that's done, both of us know what the solution is. We can have NDAs, we can have different agreements saying we are not going to tell others what we exactly did, but it's absolutely impossible for that company to stop my know-how from flowing to their rival.
In the starting, we discussed one of these sort of giving, okay, what's your requirement on this project on BMW's car?
Yeah.
And then regularly doing it again. That seemed to be a continuum from one of two full not joint venture, but let's say vertical integration that you were talking about. Now, are there different names for these? Let's continue.
There is. In the supplier development literature, there are different terms given to how long, what duration these engagements are, whether they're like project-based or a continuous improvement kind of thing. For the purpose of this talk, I am going to take that if there is a collaboration between two firms, a supplier who is common like the LG Chem or the consulting company like me, with these manufacturers, regardless of however duration that is, the fruits of that collaboration will become available to the rival. And you can try to do a lot of prevention, but empirical research has shown, and my anecdotal evidence of consulting has shown, that it's not possible. You can't stop the spillover of that fruit from happening. You can try a lot of things. Now, what some companies said was, we know that spillover can't, instead of saying that the spillover can't be stopped, they said, you know what? That last example. Tesla said, we are going to make our EV IPs freely available to other EV manufacturers. We are a great company. We love doing this. EV is the future of the world. All other EV manufacturers are free to take our intellectual property that we designed. We ourselves designed, we designed with our suppliers, whatever. You can freely make use of it. I'm not talking about here, I have not given examples of the IT industry, but in IT industry, that kind of open innovation has been happening for a while. Okay, small things here and there. So my question, what I really want to understand is this. Here are these potentially happening joint ventures, kind of joint product development between common suppliers, like this LG Chem here, with rival buyers like GM versus the Honda versus the Stellantis and so on. And here's the possibility that whatever we design with this supplier will flow over to my rival. Should I still do it? Should I still engage into this product development? Because as I'll show, joint development is not cheap. Working with a collaborator is not cheap. You have to put in the effort. You can always say, you know what, just give me whatever you can do best, and why should I put in the effort? I'll just take that, because if I put in my effort, you are going to obviously have a better product, and then that product will go on to become my rival. So why should I even do that, right? What's the point of me doing that? Is there an economic motivation? If that were to happen, if I were to collaborate, is there an economic motivation that when the product, knowing that the product will become available to my rivals, I will still collaborate? As a broad premise, I want to see what's the economic motivation of such collaboration. So the question I will try to answer is in this context. In many supply chains, multiple buyers procure from the same set of suppliers, the examples I gave, and firms may invest in the shared suppliers, even if the firms compete against each other, as we saw with the case of GM and LG and so on. What I'm going to focus on is the point that these suppliers may supply a core component, a key component, something that's critical to consumers, end consumers. And the reason I'll make that distinction is I talked about the examples being LG Chem, which supplies EV batteries. And the contention I'm making is when consumers go to buy EVs, one of the main things they're worried about is the range of the EV, which means they're worried about how high performing that battery is. It's highly possible that all these companies also buy the nuts and bolts for their cars from the same set of suppliers. But you and I, as consumers, when we're going to go buy a car, we're not really looking at who the manufacturer of those nuts and bolts are. So in my mind, for the purpose of this presentation, a core component is something consumers care about, and a non-core component is something the consumers don't. Yeah? So this quality, and quality is very abstract, very kind of one-dimensional thing over here, for simplicity of the idea, is something that consumers care about for their demand. Now, as I said, firms can promote open innovation, or they might also try to limit spillover of ideas, but this spillover cannot really be stopped. So in that context, I want to see whether co-creation between a buyer and supplier would increase that quality.
Abhishek, similar work has been done quite a bit in the automobile, for example, Anupam has been
Yes.
learning effect for automobile. So it's a known thing that there is spillover between other OEMs. If you are doing something for Hyundai, that learning effect will also carry over for Tata and all.
Yes.
that's bound to happen. How is this work approaching different from the three?
What they are trying to do in Anupam's work is that they're looking at the collaboration happening is basically something that the spillover happening is something kind of inherently bad. And what are the different ways that the spillover can be contained? For example, with learning comes forgetting. So if people are likely to forget what they learned, maybe that will contain the spillover and so on and so forth. So they're kind of still looking at the idea that spillover is bad and what are the different ways that spillover can be contained. What I'm looking at is if spillover is going to happen, would there still be collaboration? Would you still collaborate in the first place? And also Anupam, Suresh, their work is about within the same kind of overall company. So Tata Motors, two different divisions. I know the paper are talking about two different divisions: the consumer and the truck, the commercial one. They're not really competitors. In some sense, yes, they're two different divisions, and they're kind of orthogonal. The spillover that happens over there is not really hurting the economy of one division versus the other, right? Yeah, I'm still putting in work and my work is benefiting somebody else, but it's not actively hurting me. Here, whatever work I put in is benefiting my competitor.
They make access to all the organisms.
Yeah.
In that case, it's obviously going to get better. Right?
Is the quality going to get better? That's the first question I'm going to ask. That's my first question. So is it obvious? Will it get better? So that's the first thing I want to know. Yes, there is that one component supplier. As one of the buyers, is my involvement definitely going to make the quality better? Second, suppose it does, will I step in to collaborate? And will my rivals sit on the fence and make free use of my collaboration? Or would they step in and collaborate as well? And three, suppose collaboration is good and collaboration should happen for the greatness of quality and firms are hesitant to collaborate. Can some kind of a payment mechanism speed up that collaboration? Can their collaboration be induced? And what would the payment mechanism look like? Yes.
There always, what to say, for its shared supply, you always like to work because there's no other choice, right? I just don't have the capability to develop. So
I can always let the supplier.
Other than because we don't have other supply network in those cases.
Yes, but why should I do the work? I can always let the supplier do their best thing and provide me what they can do. Okay.
Second question, that depend on the structure of the market, perfect competition, oligopoly.
It will depend on the structure of the market, but it's going to happen regardless of whether it's a perfect competition, imperfect competition, and so on. So I'm going to look at competing market because I'm talking about shared supply. So there is competition. But whether or not collaboration will happen, it kind of depends on multiple different things. I'm going to give certain main pointers over there. Okay. Literature, very quickly, blah, 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 including that somewhere over there is the Muthulingam a paper here. So far, the work that has looked at this kind of, and how am I doing on time? Okay. So far, the work that has happened on this kind of collaboration, they have looked at two different angles. One angle is, yes, we should do co-creation, but that co-creation has happened between one client, like somebody who is hiring consultants and the consultant, that one firm. And they have looked at things like, okay, what kind of payment mechanism should we do to make sure that both the client and the consultant can work better, and so on and so forth. They have not looked at this rival buyers of those consulting services. What happens there? What happens to the spillover? Should we still hire those consultants? The second kind of work is, yes, spillover can happen. When you work with shared suppliers, things that you do, how do we stop that spillover? Focus on the stopping the spillover. And somehow spillover can be stopped. Let's look at all the mechanisms. The other one is, yes, we are going to work together. We are going to, see where the collaboration should happen. Multiple buyers, one supplier. The focus there has been how can we jointly reduce the cost? Not so much about should we collaborate given the spillover is happening. We will collaborate. How do we reduce the cost of collaboration? I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm going to talk about something more strategic. Is collaboration good? If collaboration is good, will firms collaborate? And if they don't collaborate, how can we make them collaborate? 3 parts. Yes.
How about they collaborate?
That's the second one. A very, very simple model. And you can extend this in many different ways. But for this presentation, I have one common supplier like the LG Chem, 2 rival buyers, firm A and firm B, Honda, GM. You can extend this to firm A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc., etc. And the consumers. Consumers go buy from firm A or firm B. The demand function for consumers for any of the product, firm A's product or firm B's product, the demand function, as you can see here, is a modified Bertrand competition. Why is that? Well, how much I want to buy firm A's product depends on whether firm A's prices are going up or down. If firm A becomes more expensive, my demand for firm A's product goes down. But if firm B's product becomes more expensive, then the demand for firm A goes up slightly. Why slightly? Because they're imperfect substitutes. They're not perfect substitutes. And why are they imperfect substitutes? Because people have different preferences. Some people like GM more, some people like Honda more, some people like Mercedes more, some people like BMW more. So these two companies are horizontally differentiated. And for this kind of innovation, the additional stuff that they are going to do, let's say in their manufacturing plants to innovate and so on and so forth, that I'm going to take them as symmetric. So they're going to do regardless of what the suppliers think. So inside the plant, they're doing more innovation to kind of make the assembly line go faster and so on and so forth. That's going to happen regardless. So that's not part of my project here. Yeah. The demand expansion thing is something that I'm going to talk about in a bit. The modification of the Bertrand competition here is that the intercept is not a constant. It is not a fixed intercept. You're not taking the market as fixed and given and then dividing it. The base demand is something that consumers look at this common component. And as that common component becomes better and better quality, this demand increases. It increases in a concave fashion. The concavity, I have taken a simple square root function. So there is you can't just keep increasing and expect consumer demand to go on linearly. There is some marginal reduction, decreasing marginal increase. But the important thing here is alpha. Alpha signifies how much consumers care about that increase. Remember, I talked about core versus non-core component, and they've made a good point about market expanding versus market not expanding. Alpha being high means it's a component that consumers really care about when they're buying it. So the EV batteries. So EV battery quality goes from 10 to 20. Alpha is very high. The consumer demand gets a lot of boost. Nuts and bolts, alpha is low. You still go quality from 10 to 20. Consumers don't really care a lot. That demand doesn't really change much. Market expansion versus fixed market. You can also think of this as a growing market versus a stable market. A growing market, alpha is high. You boost the quality of that product. Consumers adopt that product faster. Alpha high can also mean that it's going to be an expanding or a booming market. The market is already quite stable. Growing quality, the same level, same extent, is not going to grow that market faster, alpha is going to be low. Again, this is not an empirical project. I'm not going to calibrate alpha. I'm going to tell you what alpha signifies. Everyone good here so far with the demand? Okay.
I was thinking where it could get negative. So let's say in diamond market, if there is unlimited supply, even the sheen of the diamond or why diamond is value just goes down. So alpha can be negative.
For this particular project, I'm going to keep alpha positive small values and large values. I'm going to take out those kind of peculiar cases. If you improve quality, you might get some. It might be high or small, but there will be some marginal gain of demand. I'm not going to look at quality improving. This is not quantity, by the way, it's quality improving. That quality improvement is not going to cause negative growth. If you improve quality, there will be some growth, either little or a lot.
I only had this question because generally speaking, the quality of the goods is decreasing in consumer markets. So when we say shrinkflation, it is also quality shrinkflation because see, this is sun mica, but not the actual wood that we used to have. It can last for 100 years, but this one is only going to last 20 years or something. So over a whole economy, it might be the case that the quality of goods might be going down and we might not realize it. Let's say not diamond, but let's say something like chair, something like quality of education, or a handbag, a DO's handbag. So maybe collaboration can increase the quality. For let's say मेरे पास वाला बंदा है वो आराम से उस DOT quality वाला अगर handbag बनाने लग गया, would the whole industry of handbags go down?
Very good. So you are talking about certain products. Now, because I'm remembering my economics a little bit fuzzy of the term of that, you are either looking at Veblen goods or Giffen goods. Who remembers the difference? So you're looking at products where scarcity is something that drives the price up, right? So the more rarity is, the price goes up more, right? So the fact that not other people don't have that makes that product much more valuable. Not going to talk about that over here. Okay. So I'm going to talk about normal goods where quality going up, the demand goes up. However, as I said, it doesn't keep going up linearly. Consumers stop caring about quality improvement as quality is already higher. At some point, it's 1,000 to 1,010. Doesn't mean that much of a difference as 10 to 20 makes. This one? Alpha, we can have alpha different values, that's possible. But for this particular example, I'm saying that consumers, because it's given as a common component supplier, there is not much of a difference between what's going to come through manufacturer A versus manufacturer B. And any differentiation is taken into account by their horizontal differentiation in terms of demand function. But yes, you can play around with that, like alpha I, alpha J.
What can be turned from, let's say, Veblen goods to normal goods. So, for example, let's say you have a car in 1920s and collaboration is not happening and it is still exclusive product. But if collaboration happens, then the costs go very, very down. And the good is turned from Veblen goods to a common consumer goods. And now we have qualities of car that are not inspiring you for anything but just.
So you can basically say, for different time period, you have different alpha. So for different alpha, we'll say that sometimes collaboration is good, sometimes you're kind of jumping the step, but it might be good or it might not be good. So you can probably go from one regime to another regime. Sorry. Is there a question over there? Yes. So if gamma increases, the products become kind of closer together. So they become much more competitive. And I'll talk about what happens when the firms become more competitive. Yes, it will come in a bit. Okay, how am I doing? Okay, let's look at the results. So I'll go over what different co-creation arrangements are going to possibly look like. So this component can be made in an altruistic world somehow by the collaboration of all firms put together. Everybody says, oh, it's very, very important for us to do. And we are all going to come together, bring our complementary skill sets, and design the best component possible. That's one opportunity. The other one, which is probably much more common, is where one of the firms says, well, I am going to co-design, co-create this shared component, and I know that my rival is going to get access to it, but I'm still going to do it. Will that happen? The last one, which has been happening for a while and will continue to happen in the future as well, is the two firms basically say, you know what, the supplier knows best, the supplier is going to do what they can, and we're simply going to buy from the supplier. Why waste our time and effort by trying to do something which will go to our rivals? Okay. What happens with the effort? To build this component, to design this component, you have to put effort. That effort is not free. That effort comes for a cost. I'm right now considering linear costs. I've also considered, non-linear cost, convex cost, etc. The results kind of hold. And then I divide the cost into two different brackets. One, the real cost of the effort, exert the effort, and two, to basically document and certify the effort. That documentation certification comes in handy when I'm looking at some kind of a payment mechanism, because I need to document how much effort I have put in order for me to ask for payment against them. So you can think of this being an auditing cost that you yourself are bearing, so that whoever your partner is, if they're going to pay you, you can have this certified, look, certified effort, I put in 5 hours, pay me 5 hours worth of money. That's important when we have payment, otherwise it doesn't really matter. And the last one here, again, for some of the more complicated stuff, if I am going to work with multiple people, I have to additionally spare effort into coordination. I need to set up those meetings, to make up those Zoom calls, make sure that everybody is available at the same time, take minutes of meetings, and etc., all those things. So the more people, the more firms are part of that arrangement, the more expensive my effort becomes, right? Okay. Now, with that setup, what will the quality look like? And remember, this is important where we think back about how I talked about your good collaborator versus bad collaborator. Remember, if you are collaborating, your 1 hour of effort has a different value addition given your collaborator put a lot of work versus put little amount of work. So in the one firm scenario, which is, where is my pointer? Somewhere over there. I can't figure it out. But anyway, here, the one firm scenario, the supplier is the only one putting the effort. That supplier's effort to the power some factor is the output, is how much the quality will be. And right now I'm taking away all the randomness of it. You put more effort, you get better output. But if you collaborate with someone, then it's a multiplicative form. It is not just the supplier's effort, it is a product of the supplier's effort and whoever else is collaborating. And this mathematical form just brings that description. So if the collaborator puts in a lot of effort, this is high, so the same amount of work by the supplier will make a very good product. The collaborator puts in little effort, this is low, the same amount of work by the supplier will produce a worse product. This model, this Cobb-Douglas function, is basically looking at that, the complementarity of the efforts of the different firms. Yeah. It will be. It will be. What I'm basically, it was a simplification saying that the more firms there are, the cost goes up. You can have different multipliers. It kind of just, for simplification, is the same multiplier for everyone. You can have different multipliers, yeah.
If whatever the logic is going on, does it even need to be the supplier, but firms which are competitive collaborating with each other?
Not here. Because the firms put together, the two of them collaborating doesn't create anything.
So what in the automobile industry,
yeah,
in India, we see Maruti and Suzuki coming together.
Yes. Yeah. So in that particular case, Maruti and Suzuki, so that example is there was no separate supplier. The two of them are collaborating. For example, that kind of collaboration happens in the joint venture sector, right? Between two rivals coming and saying, okay, you have access to this market. So Suzuki is a Japanese company, Maruti is an Indian company. Suzuki said, I'm going to tap into your Indian company expertise and I'm going to kind of, make use of that. That's joint venture between two rivals. Here, the joint ventures, the collaboration primarily is happening between a company and its supplier. The supplier is the one creating that common component. The two firms individually are not creating that. Now, you're again talking back, for example, about vertical integration. Yes, it's possible that one of the firm buys over the supplier. And then the question is, will the supplier still make the products available to the other manufacturer?
We are where companies are giving outsourcing almost all of their manufacturing. But main companies, it's the company industry, people collaborate on research and development.
Yes.
Would that be then considered a supplier? And then this equation of that.
It can apply. Basically, the research and development wing becomes a separate entity altogether, the supply entity, and then you basically have the same modeling thing. Yes, true. Particular industry, yes. In this particular case, the consumers are not involved. No. So if you go back one step, you can basically say the firm A and firm B are customers of the supplier. So it's co-creation with, from the supplier's point of view, co-creation with the customers. From the firm's point of view, it's co-creating with the supplier. Okay. The different profit functions, and that's where the transfer payment comes into picture. One is how much money each of the firms make. They sell their product at price PI. They buy the components as wholesale price WI. That's the net margin. Their respective demand is DI. So that's the net revenue. I'm taking away, the marginal cost of production, etc. That's not the feature of you can add those things, but that's not the feature of this project. Their cost is the cost of exerting the effort to create this better component. From the supplier, same thing. The supplier makes money by selling the product at a wholesale price to these different buyers and the cost of exerting the effort. If the companies don't collaborate or don't collaborate enough for altruistic reason, the supplier can also offer a payment in return for the effort. And then each of these buyer companies, they are going to have this additional revenue from the payment that the supplier makes, and the supplier's revenue is going to go down by that payment. Okay? So one is no payments, everybody collaborates or doesn't collaborate by altruistic reasons, and the other one is eliciting collaboration by giving a payment. Okay. I'm going to skip over the steps. It's kind of so far, pretty straightforward. Analysis and results. There are some figures over here. The figures are not important. What's important is the factors over there. I'm going to talk about this particular factor, and this factor is repeating this beta S over kappa S. Remember, beta was the power term. So if I put in effort E to the power beta for each of these firms is how much my effort is contributing to the quality, right? And beta, those terms are basically kind of less than 1. That means there's a diminishing returns. So this is how much my effort increases the quality of the component independently. And kappa is the cost of that. So it is how much my cost is. So this ratio is what I call the relative contribution of a company. If beta goes up, my effort is more valuable. If kappa goes up, my effort is more costly. That ratio is the relative contribution of my effort. Okay, it's going to feature in different cases. I can find out everything within that result. So everything is analytically solved. All of them are closed form solutions. What can I tell based on those solutions? So first thing, some of the preambles. Regardless of the co-creation, whether you're developing everything by yourself, question? No, okay. Regardless of whether you're doing the design by yourself as a supplier, by involving one or more firms, one thing is true. If consumers value the quality more and more, that means alpha is high and high, in each of those regimes, each of those collaboration scenarios, you will deliver higher quality. Why? It's simple. If alpha is more, that means consumers are willing to pay more. If consumers are willing to pay more, you can get higher prices, higher P. If you can have higher P, you can have higher W. In turn, you can basically pay for the effort that you're putting in. Consumers want more quality. You deliver more quality, standard capitalistic idea, standard economics idea, nothing fancy over there. What about your cost going up? So if your cost of effort goes up, then obviously you can't put in enough effort. That means if you're part of that co-design process, you don't put in enough effort. If you don't put in enough effort, if you are designing it yourself, your quality is going to go down. If you don't put in enough effort and you're part of the collaboration, you are going to bring your effort down. You are going to demotivate. You're going to bring the value down of your collaborator as well. So their effort is going to be less valuable. Put together, your product is going to be less valuable. So if your cost goes up and you're part of the collaboration, your quality is going to stink. The one flip side of this is, which we don't see in traditional, supply chain, if my competitor is part of the co-design process, I might be part of the co-design process, I might be standing outside. But if my competitor is part of the co-design process, I want my competitor to be as efficient as possible. If my competitor is not efficient, if my competitor has a costly R&D process, they are going to put in less effort. If they're part of that R&D process, I want them to put in as much effort as possible. I want them to be good at R&D. What about that direct and indirect price sensitivities? If consumers care a lot about my price increase, that means B is high, that means I can't really increase my price, my retail price as one of the buyers. That means I can't pay a high W. That means I can't incentivize the supplier to put in a lot of effort. Quality will go down. Going back to that gamma question, what if that gamma goes up? What if companies become more competitive? This is a little bit of a tricky part. And that goes back to that expansion. Goes up. If companies become more competitive, remember, this is not a fixed market. This is not one fixed amount of market where you're trying to split it, and more competitive is typically worse. No. If companies become more competitive, gamma goes up, then each firm can raise prices, because when this firm raises prices, this firm demand goes up. In turn, customers are willing to pay more for the rival's price. What it means is that when companies become more competitive in this scenario, given that the market is expanding, there will be more collaboration. There will be higher quality produced out of collaboration. Okay, so far it's independently we know what is happening in the different setup. What's happening in the one firm in setup, what's happening in the two firm setup, what's happening in three firm setup. Which setup is better for quality? We all go back to that early example I gave. Do you like that collaborator who puts a lot of effort? Do you dislike the collaborator who puts little effort? Remember, consumers care about quality that's given by this alpha, right? What if alpha is low? I'm talking about one possibility for the supplier. The supplier says, well, I can do everything by myself. And the other one is this firm A has decided that they're going to collaborate with me, right? So one firm scenario, supplier doing everything by themselves. Two firm scenario, firm A is collaborating with the supplier. And you can have three firm and so on. If consumers don't care a lot about quality, they are not going to pay enough. They're not going to pay enough to either of the buyers, either of the farmers, right? If the firms don't get enough from the market, they're not going to pay enough to the supplier. So W won't be too high. Now think about that one firm versus two firm scenario. If it's only the supplier putting in effort, W not being too high impacts the supplier's own effort. The supplier is putting in less effort, that's true. The quality is going to go down. Suppose one of the buyers is also part of that collaboration. And the buyer is also getting to get less payment from the market because consumers don't care about enough about the quality. The supplier, that other buyer, is also going to put in less effort. Supplier putting in less effort, bad by itself. If you're collaborating, the buyer also putting in less effort is worse for that collaboration. If you are doing bad by yourself, it's one thing. If your collaborator is also doing bad, it is dragging you further down. You are already dragged by your own weight. You don't want to be dragged by the weight of your collaborator as well. So if you're not going to get paid enough from the market, which means alpha is low, you don't want that collaborator. There is nothing that the collaborator can do. Single firm better than two firms. If you're going to get paid enough, yes, two firms will be better than one firm. How does that decision change when firms become too more costly, etc., etc.? Remember, if the cost of effort goes up, you're going to put in less effort. That means, again, if you're going to put in less effort by yourself, it's one thing. If you're going to put in less effort and you're part of a collaboration, that's hard on the collaboration. So if your costs are going up, you are better off by not collaborating for even higher values of alpha. For even more scenarios, you should not collaborate. If consumers are not going to pay, if consumers are becoming more price conscious, that means you won't be able to extract a lot of price from the market. That means you will put in less effort. Again, stick with one party, stick with the single firm development for as much as possible before you're jumping in. But if the market becomes more competitive, actually then consumers are willing to pay more for each of the firms, and you can start collaborating a little earlier. This is the base story about whether or not collaboration is actually going to help quality. Quality may or may not actually benefit from collaboration. Collaboration by itself does not mean it's going to be better. Now, remember I had this idea about firm A stepping in versus firm A and B both stepping in versus supplier doing everything by themselves. What is best for quality? Not the firms, the quality itself. So remember this relative contribution by each firm, beta over kappa, beta over kappa. If firm A's relative contribution is less than firm B, beta over kappa is less than beta over kappa for A, less than beta over kappa for B. Firms E, so from the quality perspective, consumers either want just the supplier to do everything or switch over to all firms come together. There is, from the quality perspective, it's not possible for the supplier and firm A to result in better quality. Firm A's relative contribution is not higher than firm B, so it's either the supplier only, or when A is participating, it's A with B. If that's flipped, then yes. If firm A's relative contribution is higher, then there is this intermediate region where, from a quality perspective, we want firm A to be the collaborator, firm B should stay out. And then if consumers are willing to pay significantly for quality, from the quality perspective, all three firms should come in and collaborate. Okay, question. This is yes, this is complete spillover. I kind of went over to an extreme to say if there is, if you can prevent spillover, then the question is kind of moot because it becomes two different supply chains. Correct. So basically, if you look at the IP kind of spillovers happening, it is this technology is basically, I say, well, this technology take entirely of it, and you can make your own little bit of innovations over there, which is why I'm saying the two firms, there is some differentiation. The component they take, we are only going to focus on the common part of it. Whatever is going to be subsequently different, I'm going to take that as differentiation as that horizontal. That's why A and B are not exactly identical, but there is that commonality, and the commonality that I'm focusing on. You're right. It's not 100% spillover. Okay. Now, we know where quality is going to be higher, where quality is going to be lower. What are the firms going to do? This is from the quality perspective. If you're the consumer and you're only focused about where am I going to get the best quality, if alpha is in this range, only supplier should do everything. Alpha is in this range, supplier and firm A. Alpha is in the green range, supplier, firm A, and firm B. all three firms should come together and design this component. That's from the perspective of quality. What are the firms doing? This is what the firms are thinking. If here, this is where firm A should participate to improve quality. From the supplier's perspective, if quality goes up, they can get more money from the market. Supplier wants firm A to participate. This is the identical threshold for supplier's preference as well. Firm B is the one that is not participating at that point. Firm B also benefits from quality improvement without incurring any cost. So that's also the same point where firm B wants firm A to participate. What about firm A? Quality will go up, but it's going to incur its cost. Here, firm A says, well, yeah, I know firm B will definitely be happy, but it's coming at my expense, and I don't want to do that. So even though quality is going to go up over here, I'm not going to take part because it's not free for me. It's free for my rival, not for me. So it's going to not participate in the collaboration until about this point where consumers are willing to pay so much more for higher quality that firm A says, by collaborating, I know quality is going to go up. I also know my cost is going to go up and my rival is getting all of this for free. But because consumers are willing to pay so much, collaboration, even though there will be free riding, collaboration makes sense for me. I will participate. So this is where firm A participates. Then that continues. This is where firm B should step in to improve quality. Same logic. Supplier wants firm B to step in. Firm A is already part of the process. It wants firm B to step in. Firm B is the one that says, I won't step in because it's costly for me to step in. So up until this much, firm B will stick outside and just let firm A and the supplier continue, after which consumers are willing to, they value quality so much, they're willing to pay so much that firm B is going to join. So here are those resistances that the firms may not join when joining will become better. Can transfer payments help? Yes, transfer payments can help. Remember, this is how the graph looks like without transfer payments. With transfer payments, what does the graph look like? First of all, if there are transfer payments, if the supplier pays the buyers to put in effort, I know two things. One, the supplier is going to definitely pay for part of the cost. If your cost of effort is $10, the supplier is going to pay more than $5, less than $10. Why more than $5? You putting in effort is going to help the quality become better, and it can be sold to you, it can be sold to your rival. From the supplier's point of view, that effort is worth double than what's worth to you. So it's going to bear more than half of your cost, but not the entire cost, because any effort that you put, it's also going to benefit you. And supplier knows that. So it knows that you also benefit from it. So it's only going to take a part of your cost, not all. Now that the supplier is taking some of that cost, each firm's cost goes down. If costs go down, they put in more effort. If they put in more effort, projects become more valuable, collaboration becomes more valuable. So quality starts improving at smaller values of alpha. The collaboration threshold shift to the left. That happens. Will firms participate still? Well, this is what happens now. If the transfer payments are made, this is where the shift should happen from only the supplier for doing the entire design to supplier and firm A. From the supplier's point of view, that shift is no longer cheap. The supplier has to bear part of the cost. Supplier doesn't want to do that, even though quality will go up, because it's not cheap. So up until this point, the supplier will say, yes, I know quality will go up if firm A join, but it's not free for that. I have to pay for firm A to join. So I won't pay up until consumers are willing to pay sufficiently enough that my costs are going to be overcome. So here, supplier will say, I'm going to offer that payment. For firm A, that won't be enough because firm B is free riding. So firm A will hesitate up until this much. But the hesitation region is going to shrink, and firm A will, at the end, participate earlier than when there was no transfer payment. It will continue, and the same message here. The firm A says yes, firm B should join. The supplier says I have to pay. I'm not going to pay right now. Supplier will pay over here. Firm B says I am still not going to join because it's not enough. And here firm B joins, but it's still earlier than when there was no transfer payment. So payments are going to induce firms to join earlier, but because the supplier has to pay, the supplier thresholds are going to change. I'm going to close my discussion with this summary. Collaborative design processes, they may improve, but not always, the quality of the component. If consumers attach more value to the quality of that common component, that quality can increase if more and more participants take part in the co-design. But if consumers don't value the quality enough, more firms participating actually will backfire. And that threshold is going to depend on other things like how efficient the firms are and how competitive the firms are. Even if there is no payment made by the supplier, firms can collaborate. I showed the threshold. The firms that are already part of the co-design process, I'm firm A, I'm already part of that. I want firm B to join. Firm B might hesitate for a while. It can benefit from the spillover. But if consumers value the quality sufficiently highly, the free riding firms are also going to take part in the co-design process rather than sitting outside. And the supplier can induce the buyer firms to participate by offering a payment in terms of their effort. This is my presentation. Thank you so much. That's my email. And you can always write to me with your thoughts, questions that I wasn't able to answer everything here. Questions from the audience? Anything from nothing there? Okay.
Battery development with such a battery company like LG. The battery technology and quality remains
so what has been happening is battery is something that you cannot simply take from one. Just saying that I just want more range doesn't mean I just want a bigger battery. It has to fit in within the car's architecture. So if you notice, even though EVs are typically supposed to be greener cars, the battery really significantly increases the weight of the car. And that has been resulting into 3 or 4 times the tire wear, tire damage. So EVs actually, wear out tires at the rate 3-4 times than traditional cars, which means when a new battery is being developed, it just cannot be a bigger battery. It has to fit into a better car architecture. So the car manufacturers and the EV manufacturers, they basically exchange ideas of how to make a better battery, but also that's less weight, and how to basically compensate for that additional weight with somehow changing the architecture of the cars and how the overall chassis is going to change. Now, will the chassis look similar? There are some slight empirical evidence. A lot of the SUVs nowadays, even though they are from different brands, they basically share a lot of common design language, so to speak. So if you are not very brand conscious, you put together 5 SUVs in front of you and you remove the brand badges, very difficult for you to say which SUV belongs to which brand. So there are those common product architectures, and they evolve to make sure that the battery is being created is kind of fitting in overall better. So the battery manufacturer and the car manufacturer exchange ideas on how to make the battery fit in better. Other questions? So price increasing with gamma, yes, price will increase with gamma in the sense that if gamma increases, my rival's price increase will allow me to increase prices. This allows both of us to invest and design and make the quality higher. And it kind of goes back to the feedback loop. If gamma is higher, I can charge higher prices if my rival charges a higher price. And if I charge a higher price, my rival can charge a higher price. Because it is no longer a fixed market, it is not a downward spiral of prices. It can basically be upward spiral, but the quality has to improve. The quality will improve along with it. It's not for a fixed quality. The quality will improve, and as a result, the price will also increase. Yeah.
collaboration design we have in first, that is not. Now, irrespective of the spillover rate, quality of growth is to be driven based on who benefits the most with respect to their own goal.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a philosophical question over here. In this particular model, I've been looking at these different companies having their own goals with respect to profits. So individual companies, the buyers, they are kind of competing at the customer level. So their goals are, yes, we want to improve our profit, but whatever we do will kind of also benefit my rival. So there is that trade-off. That trade-off doesn't exist from the supplier's point of view. For the supplier, there is no competitor. The supplier, if there is collaboration, it's just a win. It's just a win thing from the supplier's perspective. So the supplier's objective of collaboration is basically, will quality improve? And that's all there is. From the buyer's perspective, quality improvement is good, but it is not unidimensional. It kind of comes with caveats. So that's from what I have modeled. Beyond that, companies can have altruistic goals in some sense. But what I'm trying to do over here is that those altruistic goals also have economic motives. And we're trying to show what those economic motives can be. Right? Now, if there are rival buyers, rival suppliers of this product, they might have some different goals that you can extend this model and look at it. But to philosophical ends, I am not the best person. A strategy professor would probably be a better person to address some of those philosophical questions. Yes.
Some payments, are these functions of only the efforts or efforts and quality?
Quality is the function of the effort. That's why I said, so in the transfer payment model, you can have transfer payments in terms of different things. You can say, I'm going to pay based on the output, and it's going to be a different kind of model. In this case, I said, I'm going to pay based on how much you put in effort. And that's why I wanted the effort to be measurable, verifiable, which is why I have that monitoring cost over there, that the effort can be measured, and based on the effort, I'm going to pay. So you came in, you sent your engineers, you sent your designers into this room, and those designers are not cheap. Those designers basically have a cost. I know that you're putting in extra effort. So for every time the designers come into my room, I'm going to pay a little bit of money to compensate for the designer's effort. That's what I'm modeling over here. It's not the quality is basically an implicit function over here in some sense, that the more effort puts in, the quality will be higher. But you can have a different model where you say, you know what, I'm going to pay only if quality is sufficiently high, and if quality is less than that, I'm not going to pay anything at all. That's a possible kind of model. That's not what I'm doing over here.
It's only a function of just effort. So it's like an exam payment, right? You somehow report in some sense, you're reporting your effort.
Yes.
And you are getting some transfer.
Correct.
There is the possibility of
Misreporting, yes. So that's why to avoid that, I'm looking at a mechanism where you are going to report the efforts, and it's a truthful reporting. But you're right. If the truthful reporting can't happen, you have to do this payment based on what you can see, which is actually what the output is. That can be another potential term of contract, and those contracts exist for the bilateral company, like the one firm collaborating with another firm, just two of them. I have not done it over here, but potentially you can draw a contract saying, I will only pay if the quality is of certain level, and otherwise I'm not going to pay. You can do that. This one doesn't do that.
Take an example of FMCG company.
Right.
So two FMCG competitors are there, and they are putting their laundries from the same farm or same company. The company might not be willing to pay or willing to collaborate, but the upper echelons or the echelons like the farming equipment company, those might be willing to come up with a solution where the FMCG might also benefit the raw material supplier is actually getting a 40, but the equipment manufacturer is also getting.
It can definitely happen. This particular model is simplified that everybody on top is basically one entity, and then everybody at the bottom is basically one row of entities. Real supply chains are much more complex. You have multiple levels, and you can have collaborations among some, not collaborations among the others. All I'm trying to say over here is that there are cases, there are scenarios where collaboration is definitely beneficial, but it is not a given thing. You should not simply look at collaboration for collaboration's sake. Collaboration may or may not be beneficial. Now, if you have a multi-echelon model, again, whether or not collaboration between two nodes of that will be beneficial or not will end up depending on the following nodes. How much are they valuing your output of that collaboration? If there is enough value, collaboration, each collaborator will get something out of it. If it is not enough valued, neither of you will get enough out of it, and the output is going to be worse than if each of you just focus on what you're doing by yourself. But yes, I have this model. You have to expand it. You have to kind of model it further. You can do that, but I haven't done it. It is. It is a co-opetition thing, yes. At the end of the day, the message is basically collaboration. If it expands the pie, then you might do better by collaborating than not collaborating. The question is, will it always expand the pie? And the point is that it may not always expand the pie. And if it doesn't expand the pie, collaboration is only going to make the pie even worse.
The real world, how do you measure quality improvement for results?
Very bad question. So yes, it is at the end of the day very abstract over here. In the real world, if you're basically going to look at this kind of projects, you will end up thinking how I'm going to finally basically say what consumers are going to pay for, right? So you're going to proxy that alpha by looking at consumers' willingness to pay. So if I'm going to create this better design, how much consumers are looking to pay more for this incremental better design? Now, again, I'm not a marketing expert over here, but there are marketing models that say, okay, if this product is going to be a little bit better, how much can I extract? And you can, and standard marketing models will basically say that some gains consumers are willing to pay more. After a point, the gains consumers don't really care much. So you can basically also get the idea of that alpha. It will become lower and lower at certain points. Yes, yes. There are models to do that, mechanisms to do that, and we're going to apply that. But again, there will be proxies. You'll not have the exact thing, but there will be proxies for that.
Second thing, what you spoke of right now in terms of collaboration, especially in the EV example, it will more of a case of driving standardization in the entire industry to drive the ecosystem or build the ecosystem itself, right? And therefore, that ecosystem has to be built out, especially the last example that we had in the slides where
Tesla, yeah.
opening up the EV ecosystem.
Yeah.
Anticipation that the others will also open up the ecosystem, and then interoperability over there increases, the ecosystem itself grows, and therefore they benefit as a part of the larger growth of the market.
So that point over there will be, is that standardization something that consumers will care enough to adopt? For example, with ports of charging, for a long time that has not happened, and at some point, so when smartphones were kind of novelty and interoperability was not a big thing about adoption, companies basically had their own all different charging mechanisms. They're perfectly fine doing it. At some point, if you let the market breathe, they can also still go with it. Now, if you look at, everybody is adopting smartphones, now it's all about how much you can standardize this. Consumers care about that standardization, then that collaboration makes sense. If consumers don't really look at interoperability and they're like, I'm an iPhone operator, nobody in my family is going to be an Android operator, I don't care what Android chargers look like, I don't have to have that standard. The consumers are not going to pay. By yourself, you're not going to go for that standard. The standard design, like the USB standard, for example, it's one example of this application. Yes. 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 Even Android, the ecosystem itself was something like that. HTC, LG, Samsung, they're all rival, phone manufacturers. They all said we are going to collaborate together with Google or Android, the ecosystem as a supplier, and create a better, adopt it better.
Very interested in when you introduce that collaboration can actually drive down the quality. And because customers use it, and especially in some sort of a, let's say, quality sensitive areas like medicine and airplanes, it might actually be fatal. So, yeah, so I was interested in if you can repeat that point about harm being introduced by collaboration when it was introduced in the first slide.
So what the point I'm making of collaboration failure is, if in certain cases, if consumers are not willing to pay for that increment in quality, okay, the value of quality, that means if one of us is going to make it, so effort is costly. Whatever is being done is by one's effort or multiple effort. And people expect to be in some way or the other kind of made whole for that effort, remunerated. I'm the manufacturer, I'm going to get based on wholesale price. If I'm the retailer or seller, based on the retail price and so on. If consumers don't pay enough, they don't pay enough for any of those firms. Anybody who's participating, they don't pay enough to the companies that are selling at the retail level, and in turn, they can't pay enough to the manufacturer. If the manufacturer is the only one putting effort, they're not getting paid enough, they're putting less effort, they're the ones suffering. That's fine, they will suffer. If they are dependent on the collaboration of another firm who is also putting in less effort, whatever they were trying to do, they have been doing even less. That means now the manufacturer, it's not a firm divide, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's going to come together. They have promised something, they're developing a worse product. Product is already being dragged. Their effort is already kind of not being paid back enough, and they have to now compensate for the worse outcome of their collaborator. How will they react to this? They'll do that by putting in even less effort, because their effort has now become even less valuable. So if now you have collaboration, you're going to have an overall worse outcome, because each of the individual firms, they are doing badly and they are kind of piling on each other by doing badly as well. So just work on yourself. Yes, you are going to do badly, but you are not going to adversely affect another collaborator. So just focus on yourself.
At this manufacturing,
Yeah.
and marketing.
Hmm.
Marketing is trying to create perceived value.
Correct.
When you create perceived value, then by contrast, you are discounting the value of the quality itself, comparatively speaking. Let's say if I create 10 rupees ka parle ji hai, it used to be something good 10 years ago, now it is worse in quality.
Right.
But it's more colorful, so I eat it more. So it is same quality. So over the period of time, maybe quality can keep on.
But it's not the same product. That's the point I'm making. It's not the same product. So you can.
If the perception is made the same.
So now you're basically bringing in that there is another collaborator who is not part of this previously. They are coming in, then they're putting in extra effort that was not part of that before. Their effort has to be somehow also paid for, right? Because in the previous model, that marketing team was not there, right? So how are you going to pay for that? Now they have to be paid significantly other way around. So that wasn't there before. Collaborate outside, yes. Thank you. Thanks so much, Devjit. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much.
Okay, let's all token appreciation from the IMA CTL side. So thank you so much for always coming here. So thank you. You can just come here. Yeah. Thank you so much. And he always visits us whenever he visits India. So thank you so much, everyone. And please join for a complete